What I do is create the sound and music portion of a brand's identity. The same way that you create a brand book and you have making sure that all of your messaging, your colors, your visual are all congruent and aligned and rowing in the same direction, we help develop that with sound and music.
Can bad sounds have negative effects?
Absolutely. One thing that we do is called implicit association testing, where we actually test the subconscious response of a sound. And does it create that positive association? So we test for that.
So Eric, glad to have you today, and really nice getting to know you the last 4 or 5 months. We met through the EC Takeoff program. You were an entrepreneur there. I was an entrepreneur in residence, and I'm really interested in what you're working on related to sound and how sound improves brand awareness. So I want to just go super deep today and just pick your brain on all things sound and what you call sonic branding. So just let's dive in. I want to hear about it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So first, I'll just say it was an awesome course at the EC, and I enjoyed getting to know you and the rest of the crew there. So what I do is create the sound and music portion of a brand's identity. It's just the same way that you create a brand book and you have, making sure that all of your messaging, your colors, your visual aesthetics are all congruent and aligned and rowing in the same direction. We help develop that with sound and music. And it's most well known as the Sonic logo, Netflix, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, any of that kind of stuff. And what I just did there was sung a distinctive brand asset, and I don't even have to say that brand name, and we all know who they are.
Correct.
And you could have your eyes closed and know who they are. It's the most kind of powerful statement that a guy named Martin Lindstrom talks about in the sensory branding space is, can your brand pass the smash test? And that's based on Coca-Cola's brief to a bottle manufacturer in 1913 or something, where they said, I want a bottle so distinct that it can be recognized by touch in the dark or smashed in the ground into 1,000 pieces. And what they got was a distinctive brand asset that's super recognizable. It doesn't have to have their logo. That, it's like a cocoa leaf inspired bottle that is a huge part of their brand. From touch, that sense, you get it. And then Coca-Cola, so that was kind of like the sensory branding, one of the early stages of just really powerful. Can you take the logo away and still know who the brand is? And a really powerful brand should be totally recognizable without the logo. And so sound is one of the key ways to do that, because it's something that's super tied to memory. It's how we learn the alphabet. It's how we, just the most memorable brands you can think of, the most memorable ads throughout your life are what you're remembering usually is tied to music. So,
What I go back in 25 years of starting companies or products or brands, I guess 20 plus products that had some sort of brand identity to them. And I never once thought about starting with a sound.
Yeah.
I have gone, deep into thinking about the name of the product or the brand, the ethos and the identity that people get by consuming that product or that service. The colors, the font structure, everything that goes into your traditional kind of brand blueprint, and never have really thought about it from a sound perspective. And just this week, I'm working with a client starting a new skincare product line, and they sent me over their kind of brand guidelines, and it had nothing to do with sound. Mm-hmm. And it starts to me now, after getting to know you and the importance of it, I'm now starting to go, okay, how do we implement sound as we start brands? Now, you mentioned McDonald's.
Yeah.
You mentioned Coca-Cola. You mentioned Netflix. These are big brands, right? Why should people who are starting brands or starting products think about sound first?
Well, so one is what you just mentioned. You've never even thought about it, right? That's one of the superpowers of sound, is that it actually largely occurs in the subconscious, right? So all the best directors in film will say, sound is 50% of the storytelling, but no one walks out of a film and says, oh man, the sound is the reason I thought that character had these feelings about that character. You think you came up with that on your own, but it's probably like the music or the sound that injected that feeling. It's very, very powerful, and we don't even realize it most of the time. So from a branding perspective, there's that power is specifically in the fact that we, like with the Sonic logo, we hear faster than we see. We process sound faster than we see. So when a Netflix logo pops up, the Sonic logo creates a subconscious positive association with the visual logo. You can't, it's Pavlovian style. Those Pavlov's dogs didn't decide they wanted their mouths to water. It just happened when he rang the bell. And it's the same kind of thing. If you create the right kind of sound, it creates this positive association with the visual logo. Now, a brand that's just getting started, absolutely, sound it's not just having these high level sound assets like a Sonic logo, right? Because you might say, well, we're not, buying Super Bowl ads, or, we're not, even advertising on TV at all. But one, I would just say you can use that in all of your video content online. But beyond just the Sonic logo, if your brand makes a sound that is distinct, like a skincare company, if it makes a certain kind of click or something like that, that's like an ASMR type of effect, right? The sounds of products can be incredibly pleasing, and just even talking about them. Like if you're an author, you could convey so much meaning by saying she stepped outside and heard birds singing, versus he stepped outside into a noisy, bustling city, right? Sound conveys meaning instantaneously. And it's a really powerful way to kind of inject that, even just talking about the sound of your product, like VW does with their doors. Like they want to convey that they are a safe brand, a safe car, and they have ads where they slam the door and like things fall out of the trees, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be this high budget, create a Sonic logo, create a brand anthem like Home Depot's brand anthem. If your brand has a sound, you can lean into that. But you should just be thinking about, when you have that whole brand book, right? You're thinking about colors. Just be thinking about how you're using sound, right? Because if you're like a fintech company and you want to have, like one of your ads or pieces of content has like elegant piano that sounds expensive, and then you just go into like a pop folk acoustic guitar kind of vibe, like that might work for that one particular ad, but is it congruent with all of your brand messaging? And this is really the thing, is like, can you, if you don't have the budget to do something big, or, whatever it may be, if you can just be thinking about, is this congruent? The same way that you might think like, do we want to have this picture of this kind of person? Is that reflective or resonant with our ideal consumer? Your sound, your music should be, but then ideally you can create stuff that's distinctive, that's not just royalty-free music libraries or licensing a track. You are creating stuff that is a distinctive brand asset that's ownable, that you can then build brand equity over time with.
And you say this Sonic logo or in this brand anthem. Explain that, break them apart for me.
So the kind of core process that we do is we create a Sonic identity. So we work with a brand and take all of their everything in their brand book, their messaging, their attributes, everything that they use to define themselves, and we translate that into musical ingredients that then can be, create a framework for how they show up in sound. And then the key assets we create is the brand anthem. And so like Home Depot's brand anthem is one of the most famous ones that they've used religiously in every single ad, every single, I will turn on the radio or turn on the car and be cut through right to the middle of the ad. They're still getting the value out of that ad because I know exactly who it is. Or if you're, at your watching the game and you go and refill your nachos in the other room, that if it's a Home Depot ad playing, it's them instantly. Even if you hear 2 seconds of it, that it's an ad, and they went viral online and all this stuff, right? So that brand anthem is something that's a really powerful asset that should be reflective of your Sonic DNA, right? Mm-hmm. That sounds like someone going to do some DIY work, right? And then what you do is you pull different elements out of that brand anthem. So you would have like a musical motif and turn that into a sonic logo, right? So it's all congruent. It's all coming from the same elements. And those are like the main elements. We have the create a sonic identity, that's your framework for sound. We create a distinctive, song that's, you can use it in all of your advertising, all of your social media.
And not a jingle. It's not like a jingle.
No, but it can be. But like a jingle is like, it dates back to, longer form ads that might have been a minute long, and you could kind of get this whole message across. And it was really about creating a memorable tagline or, slogan. Whereas this is actually, we are taking your entire brand attribute, your brand essence, and summing it up into a 2 or 3 second sonic logo, right? I mean, it's a lot of work that goes into funneling all of that into something that represents the brand instantly, because we don't have the long form attention span that we used to have have a big long jingle in the past. But jingles still work, and a lot of like insurance companies really lean into them, and they've started as jingles and have developed into sonic identities, a lot of them.
You mentioned we as in like the consumer doesn't have the long form connection, right? They're not staying engaged and in content, and how sound pulls them back in, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm watching my daughters watch YouTube Shorts or YouTube, and they're watching stuff like Dude Perfect and these cake making shows and these Lego making shows. And if you watch, about every 3 to 4 seconds, maybe, in between that time frame, they're changing up a different camera perspective, and they're introducing a sound as that changes and as that clicks. And it's a way to keep the dopamine, I guess, coming in.
Well, and we're just spread so thin with our attention, right? So while they might be watching, a YouTube video on one screen, they might like my kid sometimes he hangs with his friends, and we try to keep him from doing this, but like they're both sitting next to each other with one with a laptop and one with an iPad doing their own separate things, and then saying, hey, watch my thing. And it's like, these are, elements that are going to be drawing in attention. And with sound, it's something that if they're looking away from that screen, this is something that's going to draw them away, right? Because we don't have earlids, is what I like to say. For
content creators, I know for early stage brands, creating content and then creating this flywheel of content is super important, right? How often is the same sound being used? Let's just take a 60-second reel. How frequently should that sound? It should be the same sound over and over?
Well, so if you have a sonic logo, it's something that, yes, it should be used over and over, just the same way that you use your logo, your visual logo over and over, right? And the thing is that it actually is more memorable, and the more that you use it, the more memorable it becomes. Sound is more memorable than visual. It's how we learn the alphabet. It's like a big part of like our memory structures are tied to sound. And so it's kind of like a hit song that becomes memorable because it's used played all the time, as opposed to, it just showed up memorable. It definitely has something catchy to it, but it's memorable because you hear it on the radio all the time. Like growing up, songs like, was it Smash Mouth All Star or something like that was just played forever is just burned into my brain, because everywhere I went, that song was playing everywhere. And it's catchy and everything, but it's because it was used all the time. And you want to use it all the time, use it as much as possible. So you are, in branding, we need to think about refreshing memory structures. We don't think of the memory of a person as a safe, that you just give them something one time and they lock it away in the safe and it stays there forever. We need to evoke those memories all the time, right? So to stay memorable, you are refreshing branded memory structures. And so it needs to be used, and it's not like, it just depends on the brand, but it could be it comes in at the top of every video, or sometimes it comes in at the top, sometimes it comes at the end, sometimes it's used cleverly in the middle. Lollipop, I was just looking they're like a healthy soda company, and I was just looking at one of their ads. I was thinking about posting about this, but they have kind of a refreshing pop sound in their sonic logo that they use at the end of ads, but they also use it like at the beginning. There's one with like a woman and her child self pops in, and they use the sonic logo to have her come in, right? And it's something that if you're watching that, you might not even think about it, but subconsciously that's injected into your memory, you know?
Can you give me some more examples of like brands like Lollipop or how they're using them? Like, and you mentioned da 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 da. We know who that is.
Yeah.
I think TED Talk, they have is that the drop? Like,
yeah, I haven't watched a TED Talk in a while, so I'm trying to remember.
It's like this drop of like it hits like water.
Yeah,
you know. But do you know other ones like off the top of your
head? I mean,
head?
so like the most iconic ones is, you know, we look at Apple from a branding perspective on every category, and sound is another one.
Okay.
Where the startup sound, you know, it is something that screams Apple. It's minimalistic.
When you start up the device,
you start up the computer, and it just, you know, has this startup sound. And it's actually a funny story how that happened. It was like a really ugly sound, a tritone, which was actually at one point in history illegal to even write a tritone in your music. It was considered the devil's harmony. That, you know, someone had that as the startup sound for a Mac in the 90s. That was like, they were, you know, when the Mac crashed and started up again, you have the most, you know, ugly sounding harmony you could possibly have when your computer starts up. So it's like creating these awful negative associations. And luckily this smart guy thought this isn't right, you know? But so that's a big one. But they also have all of their sounds, UI sounds are their entire sonic identity. And they get so much placement in film when, you know, when we want to convey that someone's sending a text message in a film, you hear the Apple sound, right? But so other examples would be Netflix is one that's, everyone knows, and it's functional and it builds brand. Mm-hmm. So it's functional in that if you turn it on Netflix and it's a little bit quiet, it serves as like speaker calibration, right? We can say, oh, I need to turn up my speakers so I can really have the full experience. So it serves that function, but it's also, that's the brand right there. You know, we hear it and we recognize it, and you could hear it anywhere and know that it's them. Intel is one of the most famous ones, and it's kind of credited as like the first sonic logo of this era of sonic branding. And it's a mnemonic device, meaning it is musically conveys their tagline, Intel inside. And that's a really unique, interesting one because it was, no one knew what a microprocessor was, really, but like everyone knew what Intel was, right? And that's as a brand, that's a difficult thing. And I mean, you could be in a different country hearing a radio ad in, you know, Italian and hear the Intel chime come in and like, oh, that was an Intel ad, you know? So it's still working on you, even though it's a different language. But yeah, so those are some of the most iconic ones. TikTok is another one where they had a problem where they were, people were screen recording their videos, putting them on, you know, Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels, and they wanted people to know that this came from TikTok, and so they put their sonic logo at the very end there, so people knew it's, you know, they stamped it at the end of every video, right? I mean, that's, and I think if they are putting their brand on every piece of content you create, you should probably also be putting your brand on there too, you know?
Yeah. I guess I want to ask a question and go down a rabbit hole here. Can bad sounds have negative effects on brands?
Yeah, so one thing that we do is called implicit association testing, where we actually test the subconscious response of a sound, and we can put a number on it. And it's pretty wild, but it's like if I asked you if you liked a song by Shakira, you might feel like it's not very macho of you to say yes. So it goes through your conscious mind filter to say, oh no, I don't like that. But if I just played it for you and you started tapping your toes hidden under the table, you know, that's what we're interested in. Does it create that positive association? And so we test for that. And so what happens is, like I said, we process it faster than vision. So it creates this subconscious positive association with the visual logo. Now, if your sound is creating a negative appeal, then that's negative associations with the brand. And this is, you know, one thing, AI voices are a big thing right now. Well, there was studies where people listen to a bunch of AI voices, and if you ask them about it explicitly, they could not determine whether it was a real voice or an AI voice. It was like 50-50. Implicitly, they knew it 99% of the time or something like that. I'm making up these numbers, but it's something like that. So sound is always on. It's always how we make sense of the world, but it's not always rising up to our conscious mind. And so, yeah, if you're having just music that's bad quality, like you pull something from a royalty-free music library and it just sounds bad, like maybe the song is good, but the quality of it is bad. What is that saying about your brand? Like you are a cheap brand. That's the message that you're saying subconsciously. No one's going to articulate that, but they're going to feel it.
Yeah, for sure. I think about like growing up in the 90s when the internet came out and that dial-up sound that internet made, that screeching sound.
Yeah.
We all know it that lived through that era. And I don't know if it had like this negative effect on me, but like I kind of thought like the internet's not for me. And this was back in the 90s. Yeah. Okay. It's just back then it's like, and I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was just my passion for other things outside of computers, but thinking back on it now, I mean, this is, 35 years later. I'm wondering if that was like a deterrent. And like, if you're building a product now and you're designing a product, and I kind of go back to Haven Lock. When the lock opened and closed, we wanted it to make a distinct sound that felt secure. And I didn't put it through this perspective and this conversation that we're having today. It was more about we wanted to give our customers comfort in knowing or confidence in security and these kind of outcomes that came by using our product. And when it raised, it raised, and we had this little beeping noise that confirmed it was locked. Yeah. And then when it closed, the same thing. It was basically that in reverse, but you knew and you could hear. So anywhere in your house, if you were upstairs or downstairs and you pulled up your phone and you locked or unlocked your house, or you had the key fob that could lock it or unlock it, or you said, Alexa, lock my house, there was this distinct sound that came from the product, not in the marketing of the product. It came from the actual product itself. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on like companies that are building physical goods, whether it's a lollipop can, right? How do they think about sound?
Yeah, well, let's stick with that example. So what you described was the sound of the lock. You want it to sound like security, right? And so you kind of, you thought about that consciously, but there's a lot of like subconscious, processing that happened there that even got you there. And then the sound of like the beep, that is something, like you said, there's a distinctive, I'm imagining when it locked, it probably went, it either went up melodically, probably 2 notes going up, and then when you unlocked, it went down or something like that, right? One thing you can do there, just the physical sound of it. Like car companies design the sound of, when you hear a car door shut, it's designed to sound like quality, right? And different cars, they spend a lot of different brands spend a lot of time on the sound of that car shutting that has no other functional purpose other than sounding like quality. And so, what you did was absolutely something that feels like a premium product. Now with the sound, one thing you could do, and I don't know what it sounded like, but the difference between or like that sounds like a premium product versus like a generic product, right? So that is something Rory Sutherland, who's like a brilliant ad man, calls alchemy, right? That's how you take something and you just add value without changing the product dramatically. And so how can you create that alchemy, that sonic alchemy, to turn your product from a generic product into a premium product? So in the UI UX space, like if you're creating software, I'm not saying you should just add sound. We live in a world that is polluted by sound in so many ways that we need to be conscientious about how we are doing it. But it can be functional. It can help guide you through the process, reduce cognitive load, while also building these distinctive brand assets, and it can sound expensive, right? And so, I would say product sounds that are beeps, like, how many appliances have the worst, most obnoxious
My dishwasher.
beep. Yes, yeah. And it's like then there are the ones that don't, that have like a nice sound that you talk about.
Right.
You talk about both of them, but you're going to talk about them in very different ways. And when you're at the store, you're going to be like, oh, that's the one that makes the cool sound. Like when you're going to buy a new product. So, yeah, go ahead.
You may not even know you're thinking that, but like I think of like my dishwasher, when it gets done, it will beep, and it's the most annoying beep, and I'm like, I'll be laying in bed and the thing will finish, and I'm just like, it drives me nuts. And they could improve. That's just something that product could make an improvement on to make it a more enjoyable experience. And I wish like now, when we were designing Haven Lock, I mean, we had to literally, like on the circuit board, our building materials included a little speaker so that we could have that beep. But now, hearing you and going through this conversation, I would have wished we would have put a little bit more intention into the locking and the closing of that sound that came out of that speaker.
Well, and the best thing you could have done would have had a Sonic logo,
Totally.
and have that sound be like different versions of your Sonic logo, that like alludes to it, but you want it to be functional, where it sounds like it locks versus it sounds like it's unlocking, so it gives that feedback. But I mean, that's wherever you can include that. And then the other thing is like the speaker that you had in there, you could probably, for not very much more production cost, have like a more high quality speaker, and it would just add so much value, perceived value to the product,
Yeah, I don't know what we paid per unit on it, and it wasn't big. I mean, the circuit board itself was this big, and it included, Bluetooth chip and everything else, the processor on it. But I remember us having to like consciously go, do we want to add, is that this beep worth it enough for us to add this to the bill of materials?
Yeah. Whether
Whether it was 30 cents or $1.
Yeah.
It wasn't probably much more over that, but we had to think through that from a bill of materials perspective. And now I wish we would have now programmed that speaker to be more intentional than we did. I mean, we just said we just wanted a beep, and I'll pull in that beep into the video. But okay, so let's say I'm not a product company, like a locking device or a food or a dishwasher. Let's say that I'm a consulting company, and I'd like for you to actually, let's take InPaceline. So I'm a go-to-market. I help people take their products and ideas to market. And I'm a triathlete, and I really enjoy cycling. So there's a lot of things that I use in cycling and relate that to business and endurance sports specifically, and relate that back to business. And that's what I wanted to kind of use in my logo. But now if we were to take this as a non-product company, as a service-based company, I'm thinking now from a sound perspective, there's this like when the bike shifts up gears, it's a distinct sound that it makes, and it's like I'm adding power to my output, right?
Yeah.
And if I think about like growing this brand and incorporating sound and sonic branding into it, would that be something that I could?
Yeah. Well, and so it needs to be like, not everyone's going to recognize that sound, but what you just described is a really powerful analogy. And if you are part of your branding, your brand voice or your brand messaging is around drawing these parallels, then it makes perfect sense, right? And you can create content around that. Like you could have a, landing page video that visually shows what's going on and talks about what you just said and has that sound. So it becomes something that people recognize, understand the meaning of, and then you can use it all over the place, and it's that like, we had talked about this before. I said like, it's, if you are selling a bike, it would be really powerful because the person riding that bike is going to know that sound, and it's really going to resonate with them. So you might have some explaining to do. And, there's also the concept of when you're explaining, you're losing, which is used mostly in politics, but I think it's like also in branding as well, And so you have to kind of decide like, is this worth it? And I think that if your brand messaging is constantly drawing these parallels
between endurance and cycling and riding in formation, into business,
Yeah.
right? And trying to draw that parallel. Probably I don't do enough of that, to be honest, but I would have to if I was going to add these elements to my brand.
And it's a big part of your personal brand, right? Is that you are a triathlete. It's a big part of your identity, and so it makes sense to me, but I think it's got to be context. You got to add some context in there for it to.
It's like when you're on your bike and you shift that gear down, that it makes this derailing sound, and it's like I'm adding power.
Yeah.
Right. And I would love to be able to start to correlate by, coming into our founder forum that meets every week, or these things that you're adding more power to your team's output, right?
Yeah.
And I probably need to do a better job of explaining that and correlating.
Well, I think there's a way you could really concisely explain that, and it would be, and that sound is also, excuse me, that sound's not, I'm sure it's a pleasing sound for anyone. It's specifically pleasing to you because of the associations with it.
Right.
But I imagine there are certain sounds that are just like, oh, that sounds satisfying. And I can tell, there's a lot of cool sounds a bike makes that I've experienced that in general are just cool sounds, like, I'm trying to think of, like the HBO, the old HBO logo, which was associated with TV, but it's not like a melody. They call it the Static Angel is the name of it. And it was like this kind of static sound that was just signaling this, the HBO brand. And maybe it's not the best example because it's related to what they're doing, but there's sound designed sonic logos. I'm trying to pull up right now and not doing a good job of it, but that just are a cool sound.
Yeah.
And it needs to be aligned with your brand messaging, which this is, and so it could just be a cool, memorable sound, pleasing, the satisfying or ASMR effect, that just creates this like, oh, I just like that sound no matter what it means. And then once they learn what it means, oh, wow, that's really powerful.
And then you just repeat it. And repetition, I think, is important. Frequency.
It's super important. And
frequency is
important.
important.
The more you use this over time, the more you build brand equity, right? The more you use it, the more valuable it becomes because it becomes a part of your identity. It becomes, this asset that if you were to then sell your company, you could value it. It's like a intangible asset, but it's something that you could absolutely value as a distinctive brand asset that you could put a number, you could find a way to put a number on it. And that's another thing that's worth mentioning here is that, we talked about how you want to be using music and sounds that are all congruent with all your brand messaging. That could mean pulling in stuff from sound libraries or whatever, but if you can own it, that's the best path forward, right? And by own it, I mean multiple things. I mean own it as in owning the space, like a lot of brands like to own or aim to own certain words, like enjoy Coca-Cola, or Disney kind of owns the word magic, or people talk about that. You want to own this sonic space. You want to own it from an intellectual property standpoint where you own the rights to it, and you want to own it in taking ownership for being consistent with it, using it again and again in your messaging.
Yep. So that's something you would have to create that sound on your own using something. Like, walk me through like how you go about, outside of like walk me through your process. How does if I'm a brand that does consulting services and go to market for startups, and I come to Eric, walk me through the process. What's that look like?
So I would take all of your brand, your brand book and all of your messaging. We'd go through some kind of meetings of learning about, what you want to convey. Who's your ideal client? How do we resonate with them? Where do you, like a touch point analysis, where do you show up and where could you be showing up better in sound, or
where do I show up like on Instagram and TikTok?
And advertising
the channels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your earned and paid media, product sound, like you would
where
have
do people consume your content?
Yeah. All the kind of touch points that you show up that have sound baked in, which most of them already do have sound baked in. And so kind of figure out where you would be able to use it. And then we create a mood board process. We'd go through a mood board process where we kind of assemble some sounds that we feel align with your brand, and then work with you to pick the sound that you like. then we create these assets. And then there's a testing process that not everyone does, but it's something that we encourage. And it can be done at multiple stages. But so the first asset we would create would be the brand anthem. And then we could create multiple anthems, and you could run them through testing. You could choose the best one. Or,
When you say run them through testing, I'm assuming some sort of like user case studies where you have a group of people.
So yeah, there's multiple types, and what we really lean into is implicit association testing. It's almost like it works kind of like a dating app, swipe left or swipe right, and you have emojis like a smiley face or a frowny face. Just simplifying this. So swipe right means this smiley face means happy and left means sad. You go through that, you time how fast your response is, and then prime you with a sound that if that sound is like fingernails on a chalkboard, right? And you have a smiley face in front of you, your subconscious response is going to be, this is bad. So your conscious mind has to override it and say, no, this is happy. And that time difference between when you did it without the sound or with the sound is going to tell you how bad that sound was, or versus, a sonic logo, it's going to tell you how good that sound was. And so that's like the most powerful kind, because that's that implicit response. But there's also survey style testing that's explicit, where you ask people about the sounds. So any of that can be done. But if you test your brand anthem, or maybe you create a few and then test them all and pick a winner, then we pull from that. We've done like that level of testing. Then we can create a sonic logo after that. Now, a lot of people don't maybe skip that first round of testing and then test the sonic logo, which is something that is really powerful, because that's just going to show up everywhere.
How do you run that test? It's user group testing. Right?
So I work with a company that does it, and I tie like a guarantee if we work with them, and it'll score in this upper third percentile of this emotional appeal, where you have a child's laugh at the top, a fingernails on chalkboard at the bottom, and then we've mapped out over 500 sonic logos, and your logo will be in that top third, or we'll keep working until it is. Now, they go through and they can get demographics, they get, like ideally it's your ideal customer profile that they get and test, and there's a lot of different ways to do it, but essentially testing the kind of people you're trying to meet, you're trying to reach, and then just doing that process through, like testing multiple different kinds of sounds, and you have your control groups, and you're, testing doing it without sound. Yeah.
And there's a lot of science here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, is it's a really serious, like a blend of art and science, and like all good creative in the business world should be. There needs to be this level of like not leaning too heavily on KPIs and just doing stuff because we understand it as creative individuals. We understand this is going to work. But there's also areas where you need to bring in that science and reassure, if nothing else, for the key stakeholders of the company, right? But anyway, so that process is, we create the sonic identity. We do the mood board process. We figure out your sound. We create a brand anthem, or sometimes we'll create multiple brand anthems, and we pick from them. And then from the final brand anthem choice, we create a sonic logo. And then whatever other assets, but those are the core assets that we do.
And then you do some kind of consumer testing where you put your top choices out to the market and have them kind of go through this.
So you can do like a
happy, sad.
Yeah, you could do in-market testing like in the consumer space, but this is more like before you release it. This is like, and do the swiping, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like controlled test groups that people sign up to volunteer, or somehow you get like some sort of small fee to participate in the test.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. What do those tests usually cost? I'm just curious.
They start like around $5K, and then go up from there.
Wow. So, but if like I'm looking at, if I'm an M&A firm that's looking at buying a $10 million a year business, a venture capital firm that's looking at investing at putting in big money into a business, these are things that I would now want to see that have been done.
Absolutely.
To have correlation to being that $1 billion company that you mentioned, the Cokes, the Netflixes of the world that do these things. Now, if I'm an investor or I'm buying a company, I'm now going to want to go show me this test that you've done,
Yeah.
and that it ranks in this top third category
Yeah.
that you mentioned, because it is important.
Yeah. You want to have, and we can put a precise number on it, and so it's powerful for that. It's powerful for just showing to your CFO, right? I mean, like a lot of branding agencies run into a CFO who has a mug that says the tiers of branding agencies written across the front of it, because they look at it and they say, well, I know people don't buy rationally, they buy emotionally.
Totally.
But how can you prove it? And that's one thing where we bring in this level of proof that is very powerful. So you can, on your internal team, it can be powerful. And then for selling it, it can be powerful. The other thing is, you want to test this stuff. I'm trying to remember which car company it was. I want to say it's Nissan. They have like a heartbeat kind of sound as their Sonic logo. And that tested, because we also test it visually with the logo as well, not just with the emojis. And so when that sound tested by itself, the heartbeat, we have a lot of associations that mostly come from like Hollywood. Anytime there's a tense moment, we have like a heartbeat sound, right? And so that sound by itself did not score very well. But as soon as you put it with the Nissan logo, I think it was Nissan. I know BMW, I think, has a heartbeat sound too, but I think it was Nissan. It scored really high because all of a sudden that heartbeat is associated with like horsepower and driving fast and all this stuff, right? And getting your blood
adrenaline
pressure. Yeah.
Right.
So it's testing is really powerful for that too, like understanding these kinds of context, that we can overlook when we're, head down in the creative process.
Very cool. Man, this is like super deep. You talked about owning the asset.
Yeah.
And as someone who has sold a company and kind of gone through that due diligence and preparing for what we call enterprise value and building enterprise value, I think it's super important that you don't just go to some sound library and have like a royalty-free type of thing.
Yeah.
If you want to create a brand that you want to build enterprise value with and sell one day.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're going to sell your brand to another company, another entity, now we have to think, and after having this conversation, sound is one of the assets that you're going to list.
Yeah.
And in that, we've got to show that you have the intellectual property behind it, just like you would in your patent structure or your trademarks and everything else. So like, it just kind of reframes now how I think about building and improving on building enterprise value for companies from the beginning. Like we set the stage that like eventually we're going to sell this company one day. If that's the goal for the founder, then if so, then we can't be using some off the shelf, free royalty free music or licensed by somebody else.
Yeah, and also again, like that's a great long term view, but even just short term, the definition of that royalty free non exclusive license means anyone can use it, right? So you are not. People talk about differentiation a lot in branding and marketing, but really the key thing is distinction, right? You don't want to be different just for the sake of being different. You want to be uniquely unique value proposition, emphasis on that word unique, and so what are you doing to define yourself as totally distinctive? And sound is a really crucial way to do that. It's also the way people make themselves less distinctive all the time, because they're just pulling in sounds that anyone else could be using, or it's just, like I said, like this week it's an elegant piano, next week it's like a folk acoustic thing or something that some brands might work well to have that diversity. It's not like everyone needs to have the same sound all the time, but if you're kind of constantly mixing it up without intention, right? And there needs to be intention that thinks big picture of like brand messaging, overarching brand messaging, and what's right for this particular campaign or this piece of content or whatever. So,
yeah. So most of the people kind of watching this are in the startup phase. What else should they be thinking of when it comes to sound as it relates to their brand?
Yeah. I think I would just say like leaning into where you can tell your story via sound. And it could be talking about a product, the sound of a product. It could be, using that sound, just leaning into it, right? It's just something that it's not the first thing that they think of. And if you can start thinking about it, you're going to the more senses that you can resonate, you can extend your brand, the more senses you can extend your brand into, the more you will resonate with your ideal customer, right? So you should be thinking about sound, you should be thinking about touch, you should be thinking about taste and smell and all this stuff if you can. Now, all those other ones are not always available, but sound is pretty much in every touch point already, right? So how can you be better showing up in sound? So I would start with just music choices, right? Because you're probably putting all kinds of music into everything, and start to put some kind of, guardrails or guide rails on how you are showing up in music. And again, it does not have to be the same thing all the time, but it should just be intentional. It shouldn't be all over the place. And then think about, if your product has a sound, can you talk about it? Because sometimes that's something people love about a product, and companies don't leverage that enough, But then it would be, what assets can you create now, or just thinking about in the future? If you have a software product, it should have sounds that are distinctive brand assets that are reducing cognitive load, helping. It should be intentional design, right? Thoughtful design, not just adding it on for the sake of adding it. And it should be functional, but it should also build the brand. And then what other distinctive assets going into, down the line, maybe if you're not ready for it now, your brand anthem, your sonic logo, be thinking about where you want that to go. Because we are just moving into a world that is increasingly audio forward, right? So screenless computing is going to be more and more of a thing in the future with AI.
Screenless computing.
Like
unpack that for
AI
a second.
agents, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's already with people do it with ChatGPT already. They put in their earbuds and drive down the road and have conversations with ChatGPT, right? That's computing without a screen. Hey Alexa, add this to my shopping cart.
Yep.
This is all entirely audio focused, and there are really smart people in tech. Like Kara Swisher is one of iconic reporters on tech, and she recently was saying, I don't know if it was that recently, probably a year ago, feels recently, but that she thinks it's really moving into an audio only space, not audio only, but audio forward space, where it's like, and I mean, if you just think about how much it's just become a thing where you walk around with AirPods in, and it's like a status, signaling kind of thing. It's also, if you go to a different country, speak a different language, there's, real-time kind of translations that will be happening. There's all kinds of stuff, experiences of like the silent disco going in with your headphones on. I think there will be stuff where with immersive audio and immersive experiences that we're going to go showing up to concerts and have this with, maybe watch them with headphones on. There are so many opportunities for brands to make their mark here, show up, when if they're a silent brand, then they are just completely missing out.
A lot of time, like I'm now thinking through the lens of how we buy Facebook ads and how we turn. We use a lot of affiliates specifically for a product that I own and started called Glory Light. It's a kids' nightlight that projects Bible verses on the ceiling, and we've got 400 or 500 different affiliates that sometimes are active, sometimes aren't. But we request that they use royalty-free music in the content that they create for us. But at the beginning, we licensed some music from J.J. Heller. She has this song, "This Little Light of Mine," that is very kid friendly, but very I don't even know how to explain the type of music, but it's parents love it, kids love it, and this is for a kid's product. And that adds that was our first quote unquote sound related to that product, but it was her music and the advertising that we run, and we still run that ad today.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on Facebook ads with that specific sound.
Yeah.
And we get customers all the time in our feed go, who sings this song?
Yeah.
Like we're like, she's kind of famous, but like we're helping bring brand awareness to her through our product.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people will buy our product going, I thought it played that music.
Yeah.
And we have to explain like, no, there's no sound, and even in our product description on our website and on Amazon, no sound, but people buy it thinking it has that sound.
Yeah.
And the sound is more of a song in this case. But now I'm thinking, like, how do we maybe redesign the product later to include that element?
There's clearly demand for it, right?
If I'm iterating on the product and kind of launched with this MVP that doesn't have sound, and now I'm going to add sound to it, I'm definitely going to go through this process knowing what we know now.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be wise. I mean, clearly people respond to it, and it's that's like a traditional song. I think that you could, meaning like no one owns it. You could record it. I believe it is. So there's that, but it's also anyone else could use it.
Yeah.
So there's things that are worth considering with that, but I don't think there's any one right answer. It's just you need to be strategic about how you make these decisions and think, with foresight in mind.
Yeah. Because I mean that we licensed that song or paid to license it from like MusicBed or something like that. We've actually done a couple of other of her songs as well. But now if I'm going to redesign the product and really push that brand, I could use that as elements of learning.
Yeah. Well, and it's also an opportunity for a brand partnership with an artist, that there's a ton of opportunity for that. And also that she could grow. I mean, just celebrities and musicians and characters are all distinctive brand assets that people use all the time.
For sure.
Right. And so that could be, one way of it's on multiple levels. You're building a really strong brand. And it's all kind of based on that foundation of that song that's resonating with people.
Very cool. Eric, I know we're about to wrap it up here. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's taken me to another level, and I'm hoping that this video and this podcast is taking you to another level to think about how you design your brand and your products and how you implement sound into that. I know you're here in Nashville, but if people aren't in Nashville, how do they find you?
Yeah, so my company is called Walter Audio. We're walteraudio.com. I am on LinkedIn is where I'm most active. I also have an Instagram that I'm working on becoming more active on. And yeah, so if you go to walteraudio.com, that you can contact me there, or LinkedIn, I'd say, were the most likely places for me to get a quicker response from me.
Erica, before we close out, is there anything else you want to cover for today that we left out?
Well, so I will just say one thing that is related to retail and restaurants. I'm rolling out a new product that's, a whole nother podcast discussion about how sound can affect consumer behavior in the retail space and in the restaurant space. And so I'm rolling out a product that's music playlisting for retail and for restaurants, that it integrates with people counters like Google Foot Traffic and reservation apps.
Cool.
And can track your consumer flow and the music responds dynamically. So music that's above our resting heart rate can make us move faster, and below can slow us down. And both of those can be advantageous at different times. Like in a retail space, you want to slow them down so that they are making more impulse buys, versus in a coffee shop, you want them to get off your free Wi-Fi and move along. And this can respond dynamically. It's good for multi-locations, like one point can cover many locations, one interface, and then it does AI voice ads that can be programmed easily, or announcements, and then we produce ads, so we can put those in, and you can program them and program playlists for Christmas 5 years out. So that's a new product that I'm excited about. That's
cool.
A separate discussion.
And this is for like restaurants and retail shops?
Yeah, anywhere where they are using music to play for customers, and where you want to impact consumer behavior. But it's also like, if you're using Spotify, if you're using Apple Music, that's illegal. Now, I'm not going to snitch on anyone, but that's something worth considering, that, this is actually legal music to be used.
To be playing in your restaurant, it's illegal to use like a Spotify playlist.
Correct. Yeah. Those are meant for personal use.
Gotcha.
And also, like, it's the license to even just be able to choose songs, select songs the way you can in a streaming service, is a very expensive license to have. So we create playlists that are aligned with your brand messaging, and they're kind of updated over time. Like, we kind of get your whole brand profile. We create playlists, so you are sending that message with the music that you play in your store, signaling, what kind of brand you are. And then it also has these very powerful features that can drive consumer behavior.
Very cool. Eric, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot today. Hope you guys learned a lot as well. Check out Eric on LinkedIn, and we'll put his link in the notes and in the tags here. So, thanks, man.
Cool.
Yep.